can't do it anymore. I have nothing left.
Between the divorce, the cancer, your mom dying, and being laid off, I know it feels like you're going through a lot. Believe me, I have been there. Just remember, when God closes a door, He opens a window. And never forget, God never gives you more than you can handle.
God never said that. Oh, I've got another one if you want to take a shot. Yeah, they come as a pair. Bring it.
Good morning, Hope people. How in the world are you? All right? It's good. I know you're a little surprised to see me up here at this time slot. I was a little surprised myself when the guys told me that I'd be in this slot. I said, guys, I think 35 to 40 minutes might be too long for announcements, but I'm willing to give it a shot, here. And then they explained, though, it's actually to be the second leg of the 4 weeks on God Never Said That. I thought Brian did an unbelievable job last week getting us kick-started. Thank you, Brian. And really made a great point about when we're just off a degree or two from God's truth, over time we might find that we're way out here and God wants us over here, knowing what His truth is. And it's just natural that there are things that we just associate or we just accept that's said. Like even in real life here, we accept things that people may have said, and then we accept that that's the way it was, and later we find that it wasn't. For instance, are there any Star Trek fans in here? Star Trek fans? First of all, I'm very sorry. You must have had a terrible childhood, and I understand that. But Star Trek fans, I'm probably going to break your heart here right now because you're probably Captain Kirk fans, and you're going to be shocked to find out that he never said, "Beam me up, Scotty." Right? Okay? Going back further, Dragnet, remember Dragnet, Sergeant Joe Friday? Right? The facts, ma'am. Just the facts. Never said that. He never said, what? I've seen that on T-shirts. No, he never said that. He never said that. Going back, how about even a classic, Casablanca? Humphrey Bogart, right? Play it again, Sam. Never said it. Never said it. And it's true. And Cary Grant never said, Judy, Judy, Judy. Never happened, right? And in the same way, there's things that we say God said, but then we find out He really never said that. I mean, some classics, they're like, God helps those who help themselves, right? And it's always an old guy, like, young man, God helps those who help themselves. God actually never said it. Ben Franklin said that. So many people, well, Ben Franklin looks a little like God, except he has glasses, or nice fancy glasses, even. Or the one, when God closes a door, He always opens a window. I'm not even comfortable with that. I mean, think about God opening windows and doors. Makes it feel like God's sneaky. Like He's up to something. You know what I mean? It's like, yo, yeah, this is God. Yeah. I shut the door, but I opened a window in the back. It just doesn't feel right. To me. It's like, I guess it could be good news if you live in a rancher. But if you're in a split level, maybe. But if you're on the 10th floor of a high-rise apartment building, it's bad news. So we got to be careful of what we just throw out there as God said that. Now, what we're dealing with today is a little more subtle because it seems, as Andrew said, it seems so right. God will never give you more than you can handle. In life, though, I found that oftentimes God has given me more than I can handle. And if you just look at the prayer, what comes in prayer here during the week, you'd say, God sometimes does give us more than we can handle. If you searched your Bible and looked for that verse, God will never give you more than you can handle, you're not going to find it. But you will see other verses. In John 16:33, you're going to see the words, in this world, you will have trouble. In this world, you will have trouble. Times of trouble, I heard this years ago. This kind of diagram kind of helps to understand a little bit more. Someone said, good chances are that either you or people that you love, there's a good chance that you're either in the middle of a season of trouble right now, or you're heading into a season of trouble, or you're just getting out of a season of trouble. It's a cycle that takes place. In this world, you will have trouble. Why isn't that repeated? That's the think about it. That's a slogan that really doesn't sell well in Hallmark cards. You think about that. I want to give Frank a card of encouragement. Let me see here. Okay, in this world, you will have trouble. That's it. Maybe not. So but the cards, with God will never give you more than you can. They're flying off the shelves, here. So it's just natural here. It's well-meaning. It's natural. Now, if you look back to see, where could that have come from? Where's the root of that, perhaps? I won't have you turn there, but I just want to read this to you. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, it says, God is faithful. Now, that's good news. God is faithful. And listen, he will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can stand up under it. Maybe that's where we got the windows and the doors thing, there too. So here, we see that God is saying here that, listen, he says you will not be tempted beyond what you can bear. But it doesn't say you will not have more than you can handle. That whole sequence of scripture there, dealing with temptation, is saying, look, there is no temptation new under the sun. And there's not one temptation that just has your number, even though at times you may feel like there are certain temptations that have your number. But there's no temptation that has your number that you can't overcome with the power of God. But it's not saying that you will not have trouble in this world. Sometimes it won't be more than you can handle. In fact, if you surveyed the Bible, you're going to see time after time after time after time of people that had more than they can handle. Moses came to God and said, God, this is just too much. This is just too much. There's too many people I'm responsible for, here. I'm not your guy. I'm not a good speaker. I'm not a good leader. They don't even want to listen. Sounds like a pastor, doesn't it, Andrew? They don't even listen to me. There's backbiting here. And listen to Moses' exact words. Why have you brought this trouble to me? The burden is too heavy for me. Please go ahead and kill me. Trouble, burden, too heavy to the point of killing me. Sounds like it's too heavy there. David, who's described by God as a man after God's own heart, but David plagued with the past, rushing forward, where he has the guilt of what he has done, and it's just overwhelming him. And he says this, my guilt has overwhelmed me like a burden too heavy to bear. I am feeble and utterly crushed. Overwhelmed. Too heavy, utterly crushed. Sounds like it's too much. There. Jesus, the God-man, God who took flesh on so that he could relate to us in every way and that he could be the sacrifice for us on the cross. But Jesus, as he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, just hours away from being pulled out of there, knowing he's going to go into a trial of mockery, knowing that he's going to be on the cross suffering for us. And the Bible says he was deeply distressed and burdened. And he said, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow. Too much to bear. It's too heavy. The earliest time I can remember that, going back in time, they say, was the first time that I thought that life was just too heavy? It was too much. It was actually when I was 11 years old. To give you a little backdrop, my mom and dad met on a blind date. And 2 different high schools, 2 different neighborhoods, met on a blind date, fell in love in a hurry, and within months decided they're going to elope. And they did. And they went over the state line from Maryland into Virginia because my mom was only 17 years old and got married. And then they came back home and went to the respective homes and didn't even tell anybody they're married. It wasn't until like a couple of weeks later they said, we better tell our parents that we're married. And then everybody got together, and then exactly 1 year from the date they got married, my brother was born. I'm bringing that up because I know you were thinking, with the elope. So exactly 1 year later, my brother was born, and then 2 years later, I was born. Now, this is going to shock you right now. At 11 years old, I was a little bit of a mama's boy. Yeah, I know. It's a shock. I know, because I know the descriptives that you think, studly, machismo. right? I know. But just to prove that I was a mama's boy, I brought in the rabbit that my mom made for me and that I slept with every night. And I was weaned off of this my junior year in high school. and mostly weaned off of it. There are times, that, but my mom made me this. I was very close. My mom, young, you can imagine, young, just beautiful artist. I love my mom. She taught me how to play baseball. She gave me my love for baseball. We played Candyland. When I say I was a mama's boy, like at the age of 11, I wouldn't mind sitting on my mom's lap and we're talking and I'm at the dinner table and whatnot. I just wouldn't. So my life came to a shattering halt at age 11, where it became evident from everything that was going around that there was a big medical problem, here. And to the point where that I'm not sure my mom is going to be around, here. So I can remember walking to school at age 11 and just being overwhelmed with anxiety and saying, I've heard about orphans, and I know that happens, out there. But I'm saying, it's you, David. It's you. It's happening to you. And I can remember that feeling of, it was just too much. It's too heavy. So why would God give us more than we can handle? At times when life just feels like it's trouble, in this world you're going to have trouble, but it gets so bad that we're spiraling, and we just say, life stinks. And in my notes, I had another word that began with an S, but I didn't put it in there because I didn't want Andrew getting emails this week. But sometimes life stinks, and we think it stinks. We feel like it stinks, but it doesn't stink. Life is precious. And your life is precious. So why would God give us more than we can handle? Number one, so we learn to depend on His presence. We learn to depend, to rely on His presence. He brings us to that place where we can rely on His presence. Listen, tendencies. I'm not saying 100%, I'm not saying everybody in this room, but tendency. When life is going good and life is rocking and we are moving along well with life and everything is rolling along, tendency is to forget about God, or at least to have God at arm's length. Things are going good here, God. Things are well, things moving along here. You just keep the world going and I'll keep my end going here. No need to meddle here, God, just out there. That's a tendency. But when life gets hard, when it gets rocky and it gets gritty, we're calling on God intimately, close. Please, God, remove this. Please help me here. That's just a tendency. Life gets bumpy, life gets vulnerable, life gets scary. That's when we can have that. That's the time when we actually will call to God. Sometimes that's what we need, to call to God. And it's interesting. I was thinking about the times that you can go through the week, where people go through the week, a businessman, not thinking about God at all. And I was thinking, sometimes airplane travel is a time where you actually think about God. You know what I mean? I don't care if you're an experienced traveler or inexperienced, but when you're in a plane, there's times, I fly enough in the plane, but every once in a while, you hear, we're flying at 35,000 feet. I'm thinking, why so high? It's like you come to a realization that, we're 35,000 feet in the air, and I'm in a tin can, and there's nothing under me. I don't even know who's driving, this thing. And there's a little bit of panic or anxiety that can take place there. Now, some people are a little bit more anxious about flying than others. Take a look.
Good morning, I'm your hostess. My name is Barbara Jo Babcock.
Miss, can I have a glass of water, please?
Just a moment, sir. Good morning, my name is Barbara Jo Babcock. Welcome aboard Flight 62 to Houston. We will be flying at an altitude of 32,000 feet, arriving in Houston at 10:30 Central Standard Time. This is a pressurized cabin. If at any time we should lose our pressure, an oxygen mask will drop down in front of you.
May I try that, please?
Oh, sir, this is only a demonstration.
I know, I want to
It's
practice with it.
Sir, that won't be necessary. Just hold it over your mouth and breathe normally.
Yes, but I can't breathe normally. I have a sinus condition.
Sir, as long as you have a nose and a mouth, it'll work for you, too.
Sarcasm. Certainly inspires confidence.
You inspire sarcasm.
In case of emergency, we have emergency exits located in the front of the cabin. We have 2 located over each wing and 3 at the rear of the air. Yes, the man with the sinuses.
Why do you have emergency exits? Obviously not to bail out. They didn't give us parachutes.
Believe me, sir, they have a purpose.
I know they have a purpose. It's an emergency. I just wondered what kind of emergency you're thinking about.
Well, in case the plane is forced down and catches fire.
Oh, my God!
No, that has never happened on
Yes, but you notice they do have an emergency exit everywhere.
Would you rather they didn't?
Oh, I feel faint.
We're
Oh,
still on the ground.
why? Why are we still on the ground?
Because that's where we start from. Then we go up in the air. When we get to Houston, we go on the ground again, just the way the Wright brothers planned it.
More sarcasm, huh?
This is the captain speaking.
That's the captain. He's speaking to me. Yes?
I'm sorry, but we'll be delayed on the ground for an indefinite period.
Why?
Thank you.
Why? Why?
You, Felix?
What channel is he on? I'm getting Victor Borger. Get off! What? What? Where's the emergency exit? Where? Look at that. Look at the size of that woman. If she got stuck in the emergency door, we'd all be dead.
Please, if she gets stuck in the door, I'll push her through for you, I promise. Please, will you? Look at now. What is it?
Those men on the ground under the wing, what are they doing?
The mechanics.
No, something's wrong. They're pointing up the wing. They look so worried. I can read his lips. I much fear serious trouble in the fuselage, Frederick. Help me, what's the other guy saying?
I much fear there's some nut trying to read your lips. What's the matter with you?
They're running away. They're running away. They know something. No, because they're afraid. I'm coming, Fred. I'm coming.
I love the. I could watch that 100 times. Actually, I have watched that 100 times. I was a little bit of an Odd Couple junkie as a kid, but you see there stress, scary. There, Felix. Not the way I'd say call on God, but oh my God, there. When you're in a scary, stressful, vulnerable situation, that is the time sometimes when we will call on God. Airplane travel is interesting. I found, no matter how experienced you are, we can all agree on one thing. The one thing we don't like is turbulence. And there's 2 types of turbulence I found. There's turbulence, and then there's turbulence from hell. You've got 2 kinds, really. And we've experienced both. There was one time we were on a flight to Palm Desert. We were flying. Jamie was actually in Karen's womb. She was 9 months pregnant. We were traveling with Karen's parents because we had no money and they took us on vacation, back then. And we were going to Palm Desert. And I remember it was beyond turbulence. It was like wind shear, and it was scary. Now, the difference is in turbulence, that's when the stewardess comes on and says, fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a little bumpy, we're going to delay the beverage service, this, that. And turbulence from hell, the stewardess can't speak. And that's what happened. I remember I was in the aisle, and I looked back and saw the 2 stewardesses strapped in, mascara and tears coming down their faces. And I thought to myself, they've probably flown hundreds of times, maybe thousands. This is probably not good, here. And when we landed, I was so sure that our wing was going to hit, because we were like this. I tell you, there were times looking around there, and I've been in other flights like this, where lots of praying is going on in times like that. People would look at each other with worried looks like, what do you know? I don't know anything. What do you know? And then they'd go down and praying. Those are the times. What is it? We could go through our week, not even think about God, get into a situation like that, and we are calling on God at that time. We see this also in the life of Jonah. God said to Jonah, I want you to go to Nineveh. and I want you to preach to the Ninevite. I want you to tell them about me. So Jonah goes and gets on the ship in Joppa and heads straight to Tarshish in Spain, as far away from God and where God told him to go. That is rebellion. We do it every day. We sense in our heart and our spirit that God is saying, I want you over here, so we go over here. We sense in our heart and our spirit that God is saying, I want you doing this, but we find ourselves doing that. So Jonah's on the ship going to Tarshish. Big storm comes up, and the ship is going to be capsized. The sailors are all calling on their gods. They're asking Jonah about his God. They're trying to figure out what's going on. They and Jonah together came to the conclusion it's probably because of Jonah's rebellion that this has taken place. So Jonah says, just throw me overboard. They really don't want to throw him overboard, but they finally agree to do it, and they throw him overboard, and he ends up in the sea, and he gets swallowed by a great fish, a whale. And this is where we pick up. Now, you in your life, you may be saying, there are times when you just feel like you're you've been put through the ringer. That's an old-fashioned term, the ringer, wringing water out of the clothes. But you've probably never been digested, So that's got to be a whole other area of distress. But here's what we read in Jonah. In my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you. Now, note what it doesn't say. It doesn't say, in my success, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. It's in my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. We're more apt to be in that place where we can call on the Lord sometimes in the valley than we are on the mountain. On the mountaintops. Listen, another thing that can happen though, when we're in that storm, when the winds are blowing and the waves are crashing, and we're in that, there's another tendency too, that we can't believe that a loving, caring God's out there, and we're in this stressful situation here, and we can't kind of reconcile those two things. Never let the presence of a storm cause you to doubt the presence of God. And never let the presence of a storm cause you to doubt the presence of God. Back when I was 11 years old, I can tell you here, it was a time and place where I say that's the first time I felt like life was out of control. It was just too heavy. The burden was too much. That was the same time and place where I came to that first realization of the person, the presence of God, the person. Not an idea, not a thought, not a Sunday school lesson, but God, the person. That's what was needed in my life at 11 years old. So why would God give us more than we can handle? Number one, so that we can learn to rely, to depend on His presence, Him personally. And number two, that we can experience His awesome power. Being honest, too often in life, I am desperately trying to hang on, desperately trying to do things in my own power, in my own strength, hanging on by my fingertips sometimes. Maybe you're the same way. I kind of ask you and me the same question. How's that working for us? How's that working for us? There's a story that Pastor Craig Groeschel out in western part of the United States, big church, Western, Craig tells. It's a story about being as a kid driving on family trips in cars. And Craig's a little younger than me, so I can relate to this, not too much younger, that driving in a car as a kid back then is different than our experience today. Today, as parents, you have iPods and iPads and streamed in movies and games, to keep everybody occupied. Back then, we had two things: rules and the enforcement of rules. Yep, that's what we had. You're on that side, there's an imaginary line in the middle, don't be penetrating, in between. So as they're getting in a car ride to go on this family trip, Craig's father says, "Craig, I have an idea. I bet you can't hold my hanky out the window all the way to Grandmom's house, 2 hours away." Now, here's the crazy thing about the bet. There was no payoff mentioned. It wasn't like, I bet you $10, or I bet you can't. If you do, when we get to Grandma's, we'll give you an ice cream sundae. There was no payoff. That's the unfair thing, because guys are programmed to still take the bet. Yeah? Girls would be like, what's in it for me? Nothing. Forget it. You know what I mean? So guy, you bet I can't? Well, I bet I can. Give me that handkerchief. So Craig gets the handkerchief, and he's out the window, and they start on their trip, 60 miles an hour down the highway to Grandmom's house, and he's holding on, to the hanky. Every once in a while, his father would taunt him, hey, Craig, I bet you can't. Oh, you bet I can, huh? I'll bet you didn't know I had another hand, did you? And he's holding on, and then two hands, holding on to the hanky, 2 hours, 60 miles an hour. And they pull up in front of the Grandmom's house, and Craig's, I won. His father, Craig, congratulations, you won. His hands were blistered. His fingers were cramped, from holding on to that hanky. But he won. It wasn't until like 2 decades later that he says that he realized when he had his own kids, his father was, smoking his butt. He was tricking him, to keep him busy, away from his siblings. That was the whole idea. But Craig remembers, here's the key thing. He remembers this unbelievable feeling of holding on to the hanky. I got to hold on. And it's a picture of what you and I are doing in life. We're holding on. My power, my strength. And God is saying here, as he's remembering this, holding on the handkerchief, my power, my strength. It's because we believe the lie that God will never give you more than you can handle. And if he won't give you more than you can handle, then you got to hold on. You got to have the strength. You got to have the power. But you weren't created. I wasn't created to have all the power. We weren't designed to have all the strength. We were created and designed to need him and to be desperate for him. And when we come to that realization that he doesn't expect us to handle everything, that's when we can see his power at work. The Apostle Paul lived this. He lived this. We read, the Apostle Paul says, about a thorn in the flesh. Now, we don't know exactly what that thorn in the flesh was. It was a metaphor for something in his life. And I think it's actually good that we don't know what it was. Because if we knew, it was a speech impediment or it was migraine headaches, and we say, okay, that we just relate to that one thing. But since we don't know what the thorn in the flesh is, we can all relate with all of our thorns in the flesh because we all have them. The things that are just too much, whether it be physical, emotional, relational, situational, financial, thorns in the flesh. But what we do know about Paul's thorns in the flesh are he hated them. He wanted to get rid of them. He called them a messenger from Satan that daily taunted him. And he pleaded to God. He says he pleaded with God 3 times to remove it. Now, you might read that and say, oh, I guess he asked God 3 times. No, if you unpack that word pleading, it's long seasons, probably churches all praying, maybe fasting, pleading, begging God, take this away. Please take it away. And that's where we pick up in 2 Corinthians 12. And you don't have to turn there. It'll be right here. As he's pleading to God, this is what Paul writes that God said. But he said to me, Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in your weakness. My grace is sufficient for you, Paul. For my power is made perfect in your weakness. And then Paul goes on to what I would call crazy apostle talk after this, because he goes, well, if that's the case, then I'm going to really, I'm going to boast even more about my weaknesses. And he says, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses. I delight in insults. I delight in hardships. I delight in persecutions. I delight in difficulties. And if you know anything about Paul, he had all that. Read Acts. Lots of it. Lots of persecutions. Lots of heartaches. Lots of difficulties. Here's the key, folks. For when I am weak, then I am. For when I am weak, then I am strong. This great exchange takes place. Our weakness for his strength. But this is me, being honest again, in life. I'm rowing my boat. I'm rowing. I can do it. I can get there. He'll never give me more than I can handle, and I'm going to do it. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. Until one day I can't. And all along, there was a sail that I never put up. The sail that God's power in his wind could power my boat and get me across. The same Spirit and the same power that rose Jesus from the dead is the same Spirit and the same power that can put wind at our sails in life. But too often, I'm so busy rowing, I forget to put the sail up. My power and my strength. There were two doctors that were up to speed, who were specialists enough to deal with my mom's situation. One of them was in New York City, and one of them was in Baltimore, where my folks lived in Maryland. And they respect each other. These were two peers that respect each other greatly, but they had a difference of opinion on the prognosis for my mom. The one in New York was hopeful that this was a cyst behind her eye. And Dr. Iliff in Johns Hopkins in Baltimore thought that it was a melanoma tumor. You can imagine which one we were clinging to, which one we were hoping for, which one we were praying for. And my folks, they're about 33 years old, brought into Dr. Iliff's office, sat 2 chairs in front of his desk, and then Dr. Iliff, after many, many examinations and testing and back and forth with New York and Baltimore, gave them the most dreadful news. Yeah, worse than even he thought. Yeah, pretty clear. My mom's life was ebbing away. Matter of months. They got off those chairs and they went out to the garden in the hospital and sat down on a bench. And I'm sure they cried. Yeah. And they again, though, pleaded, begged God. But different. Lord, give us time. We just need some time. We got an 11-year-old boy and a 13-year-old boy. Give us time with our family so we can see them through this, to get them moving on in life. 12 years later, my mom got out of a hospital bed in Atlanta, Georgia, St. Joseph's Hospital. She was there for 2 weeks. Put her in a wheelchair, and they brought her down, brought her to the first floor, and she got up out of the wheelchair, and she looked at my dad and said, there will not be another wheelchair on the other side of this flight. And there wasn't. And they got off, and she got off without a wheelchair, and my mom and my dad danced and laughed and celebrated at my brother's wedding in August 1984. 2 months later, they got on another flight, and they made that trip. And again, they danced, and they laughed, and they celebrated at Karen and my wedding. Two months later, in December 1984, I believe my mom also danced and laughed and celebrated as she went to be with the Lord in heaven. And you can clap to that. The 1.5 years that Karen and I had together with my mom in our courtship, engagement, and marriage just before my mom was taken from us was critical in shaping our faith as we witnessed courage, dignity, faith, love of the Lord, and love of the family was critical in the shaping for her and I on our marriage and our family to this day. That's okay. Thank you, Tina. Thank you. She's a sweetheart. My dad was blessed with a second sweetheart, Sandy. They've been married for years. We love Sandy. She's a very wise lady. And she has a term, a phrase that she says that I really think kind of depicts what we've been talking about. Gives a picture of what we've been talking about this morning. Sandy's phrase is, the blessing of brokenness. Because when we come to that place and experience this great exchange of our weakness for His strength, that is the blessing of brokenness. Father, thank you. And Lord, as only you can, I pray that you would deal with each one of us individually, even right now. That you individually would deal with each one of our hearts and each one of our minds, one-on-one, so that you can complete whatever it is that you want to complete today. Thank you, Father. I just want to say, I love you. Amen.